All right, everyone. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different from the other ones. Today, it will be a solo podcast. It will just be me and you exploring some, I would say, interesting ideas, and hopefully we get something out of it. But always keep in mind that I am a pseudo intellectual, and you are not to take anything I say seriously because I am full of shit. So let's start. Now, in the past, we've talked about solipsism, right? And for those of you who don't know, when I talk about solipsism, for the most part, I'm talking about metaphysical solipsism. Now, what is that? Well, metaphysical solipsism is primarily the idea that you are all that is sure to exist. In other words, everything that you see, hear, touch is just a part of you. It's not really, it's an illusion. It's not real. You are the only thing that's real. That's the main idea. Now, it's not an idea that I particularly subscribe to, but I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it is worth exploring because we really don't know as much as we think that we do know. So now that we know what metaphysical solipsism is, then I think it's important that we talk about it in the context of morality, because solipsism is a form of metaphysics, which is to say it's an explanation of the first principles of things. It tells you what exists and what doesn't. It's an ontology of sorts. And so when you take this into consideration, we have to take into consideration the fact that if you're a solipsist, for example, then you are going to be affected morally by that. And this is because your metaphysics, or what you think exists or doesn't exist in the world, directly affects how you behave in the world, right? If you don't think that other people that you interact with are real, then that can lead you to make a very particular assumption about the way you should treat people, right? If they don't feel anything, then it's inconsequential how you treat them, right? The only reason why you would not mistreat someone would be because it would, cause you some sort of personal damage, right? In your little illusion of a world. And the other, idea about morality is that it's not just about solipsism, it's about any morality, right? A Christian has, a set of metaphysics, right? If you're a Christian, a fundamentalist Christian, and you believe that, for example, the earth is 5,000 years old, and all these stories in the Bible are literal stories, things that actually happened, then if you take that into consideration, that will mold your morality. The same thing for someone who, believes in the Quran, or someone who's Hindu, or someone who is an atheist who sees the world from a materialistic perspective. Your metaphysics, what you think exists and doesn't exist, that is the precursor to your morality. That is where your morality comes from, right? That's where it starts. It starts with what exists, and then after you decide what exists and what doesn't exist, you decide what you should do about it, right? You can't make moral decisions without there being a sort of, fundamental variable or set of variables that were there to connect to your morality, to give you something to do, right? And so now we're in a different situation because our metaphysics are changing drastically, and they're changing rapidly. And this is a new thing for us, right? And being able to adapt to this is going to be a challenge. It already is a gigantic challenge. I mean, we are changing at an incredibly rapid pace, and we're finding out things about the universe that for thousands of years were complete mysteries to us. Thousands of years, we had no idea what a black hole was. If you would have tried to explain that concept to someone, I mean, it baffles the brain of the world's top physicists today, much less, telling someone thousands of years ago the concept of a black hole and a singularity occurring, right? That is something that is impossible for us to wrap our heads around. And so as we move from the world of Christianity and just religion in general, we move our metaphysics in another direction. And if we move our metaphysics in another direction, then logically our morality has to change as well. But the problem is that we're not replacing it with a metaphysics that is directly embedded to morality, which is to say, I mean, in the Bible, for example, right, it's not just a series of metaphysics, it's also a series of morals, right? The reason in the Bible that you're supposed to follow what God says, it's because God is real and this is what he tells you you should do. In the scientific method, that doesn't really exist. It's not that direct connection between what is and the morality, right? They tell you what exists. They tell you what's going on in the world. Black holes exist, people die, people age, all of these things happen. But what they don't tell you is what to do about it. There is no direct morality that is embedded into the nature of existence in the universe, right? It's just there's no evidence that there's anything guiding this. And so we have to make something up. And this seems like a simple task, and it really isn't. I really think people completely misunderstand this and think that morality is something very simple. I don't think it's something as simple. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think it's as simple as the golden rule. The golden rule sounds excellent on paper, right? When you haven't really taken it into consideration. And the reason that's true is because the way you want to be treated is not the way everyone else wants to be treated. And thinking that can lead to some very serious problems, right? It's almost a way of kindly imposing your morality on someone, which seems like an oxymoron because it is, because it makes no sense, right? You treat someone the way you would want to be treated. And so, when you start really thinking about that and you take into consideration that everyone doesn't want to be treated the way you want to be treated, then we have to sort of change the message. It changes from treat everyone the way you want to be treated to treat everyone the way you think they would want to be treated if you were them, right? So if you were in that person's position, now it becomes an empathy thing. So what should I do to treat this person the way I would want to be treated if I were them? If I had their sort of mentality and their experiences, what should I do? And then it becomes more complex. And the more you think about it, the more complex you realize that this is. And we're not helped out by what seems to be a subjective pool of morality, right? It seems like there's really no evidence that morality is objective at all. It seems like it's just forms of behavior, codes of behavior that we've made up through time. And I don't see anyone who really has genuine answers about this. I see people saying, be kind, do this. I mean, that's very simple stuff, but I agree with that, but that's very simplistic. Right? It doesn't really get to the bottom of complex situations which we face in life. And we face complex situations all the time. Right? Your wife or your husband cheats on you. What do you do? Well, you have to take a bunch of things into consideration. You have to consider what type of person you are. A lot of people would just cut it off in that point. How would you feel if this happened to you? What would you do? How would you react? Everyone would react differently. And another problem that I have with moral codes so far is the fact that they're sort of universal, right? It's one system of being, one code of ethics for everyone, which I think makes no sense because I don't think everyone can abide by the same code. I think on a societal level it makes sense, but on a personal level you're not going to be able to function the way everyone else functions. You're different. Everyone is different. People have different, potentials. People have different things that they can do, things that they can accomplish. And so I don't see it working, this ideology that we can, sort of have everyone behave the same way, abide by the same moral code. Again, from a legal perspective, it makes sense, right? Because you want society to function as a whole. But from a personal perspective, it really doesn't, right? And so now that we see that we're in some sort of a moral abyss, which I'm willing to be wrong about, if anyone can provide a better argument than mine, I'm all ears. I mean, if you can shred this to pieces, I would be glad to hear it. There would be no hostility in that. I'd love to hear that. But what will be the future of our morality? That's the issue here, right? Because now that we're moving closer and closer to a secular society, we need something to replace the old moral systems with, because we really don't believe in their metaphysics anymore because we've proven them to be false. And so now we need a replacement. What is the replacement? What will come in our direction that will lead us out of the subjective abyss of morality that we have today? Who knows? I mean, perhaps there will be new religions that occur. right? I think we are seeing new religions. They've been occurring for a while. You know, things like Scientology, although you know that's really not a religion if you look at it, you know, deeply. And it's a huge mess, by the way. It's not something that's been, you know, considered to be successful. Successful in the sense that it's been able to grow and have some large figures like actors, you know, people that are famous participate in it, but it's a disaster nonetheless. Especially when you take into consideration, you know, what's been happening in the Church of Scientology. It's a disaster, right? And so you look at other religions that have popped up. What you had in the 70s after the end of the counterculture, what you had was, you know, the remains of that, and the remains of that were a series of cults, right? There were people who were looking for guidance after the whole hippie movement didn't work out, and they realized that, you know, communism wasn't going to work, and, you know, free love wasn't really going to save the world, and so we now have to find jobs. Well, I don't really want to do that. I fell in love with the lifestyle that I had before, the whole hippie thing. So what did we do? We started cults. And how did that turn out? Not too good, right? What else do we have? We have the Mormon Church, the Latter-day Saints, right? That's really just pseudo Christianity with some other enhanced books, and you know, inside of it, just another story, another version of the Bible. It's like the Bible 2.0, except it really doesn't seem to have made much of an improvement. I mean, it has, men marrying various women. It doesn't seem to really impose any significant positive changes that we can see, right? And what's positive, of course, is subjective, if morality is subjective in and of itself. And so that's the problem that we have here. But the other problem is that we don't seem to have anything that even looks like a solution so far. And I'm very surprised. I think we're doing extraordinarily well considering everything that's happening, all the changes that we're going through. I really do think that this is showing how resilient we are as human beings. Because for a society to, come from a standard code of behavior, of morality, of living, to get away from it gradually, and to include people with other ideologies, just like in the US, we're a gigantic melting pot. We are the world's largest melting pot because we have people of all religions, of all ideologies blended in together, and it's not collapsed. But there are significant problems. There are really significant problems because it's really hard for, that diverse population to understand the other side of the population, for people to really communicate successfully. It's a hard thing to do, and that's why people are still sort of segregated. We're not legally segregated, although some could argue that in some ways we are, but what we are is segregating ourselves. Right? You look, people still live in communities of people of their ethnicity. They still hang out, with their own little groups that sort of have the same ideology that they do. Of course, there's exceptions, but this is for the most part what remains true, even here in the largest melting pot in the world, in the United States. And so, a lot of people turn to insanely crazy experiences, right? They turn to things like psychedelics, for example. Well, what the hell is a psychedelic? It is an insane substance that plays with your consciousness in a way that is inexplicable to, I think, anyone. I mean, even the people that tried to make the most sense of it were baffled from the moment they took the first dose to their death. I mean, look at someone like Terence McKenna. Right? He boldly said that nobody knows jack shit about what is going on. And this was someone who experimented frequently with these substances, someone who really had experience in this. And so what role will psychedelics play in the future of our morality? Because I see more and more people going towards the psychedelic road looking for answers, right? Looking for a way to explore their consciousness by changing, its chemical makeup temporarily, and then coming out of that and trying to make sense of the world after that. And I do think there's a place for that, but I don't think we know enough about what we're doing, right? And because I think we don't know enough about what we're doing, that's why I think psychedelic research is the way to go. I do think that there's a possibility, not a guarantee, but a possibility that this can have an insanely rich impact on our society, right? Because psychedelic research is trying to look at this from a more objective standpoint. When you look at MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, these people are doing something that really hasn't been done before, not since the 60s and other times, right? They're starting with the idea of a mental illness, of getting rid of depression, PTSD in soldiers, things of that nature, and they're using entheogenic substances. They're using LSD, they're using, MDMA, things of that nature. And the results for now are pretty impressive. I mean, they have been successful in significantly reducing the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's much better in a sense than many other substances that we use today, because of the fact that if you're on an SSRI, an antidepressant, you have to take it every day. If you do psychedelic therapy, you're in a comforting setting, right? They try to make you as comfortable as possible. They give you a psychologist to work with you throughout the experience, someone who's an expert, knows what they're doing, and to sort of guide you. And then you come back from that and you try to make sense of it all. And it seems to help. The research is early, but it seems to be helpful. Especially with psilocybin, we've seen a huge occurrence of optimism in terms of how helpful people believe this is going to be. I mean, we still don't know, but we do have a good idea of what's going on here, and it seems very promising, right? But the next step, right, after we study it from the standpoint of mental illness, would be to study it for other uses, right? Because these drugs have been taken for thousands of years for various reasons. So if we can use them for mental illness, then why not study and see if it's helpful for creativity, for people in their careers who want to, just create something new, something that's never been done before. People who want to work through certain problems, right? That they aren't necessarily mentally ill, but they want to work through certain problems in life. So how can we combine our chemistry with the chemistry of these plants, these chemicals, and transform ourselves into something that we haven't been before, right? And the other problem with this is the fact that we don't know where it's going to take us, right? This is an experiment. We've been playing with these substances for thousands of years, and I say playing because for the most part we really didn't have an idea of what we were doing. You could say the shaman has an idea of what he or she was doing, and that's true to a certain extent. They had a subjective knowledge from their own experience, but that's just not the same, right? So, I mean, it's well known that some people just should not take psychedelics. I mean, people who have a family history of psychosis should not be touching these things, right? It is not a good idea for your own health. It's a serious problem, and I think people, tend to go in extremes when it comes to psychedelics, right? We go through the extremes of people who know, jack shit about these substances, and they basically say things like, well, this is all poison and this is all trash. Nobody should be taking these substances, right? And that's, the less educated side of the psychedelic spectrum. And then on the other side, of course, you have people who say, well, yeah, these are awesome. These drugs can save the world. They can provide us with a transformation of the world that we've never seen before, and they can make everything so much better than it already is. And to that I say, maybe, but we really don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who take, gigantic doses of psychedelics, and they're still stuck in life. They still don't know what they're doing. It's still sort of a mess for them, and they're not really getting it together. It's not really helping, right? And so, with that taken into consideration, we really have to take the idea of set and setting, which, Timothy Leary loved to talk about because it was so important. Set and setting is important, right? It's important under what circumstances you consume something and how much of it you consume. What is your mindset like? Where are you? Why are you doing this? What dose will you take? How are you going to process the information afterwards? These are all questions that we have to ask, right? On top of that, there's the legal issue of the psychedelic experience. The fact that it's illegal makes it so difficult to, for people to do. There's the risk of actually getting arrested for trying to experiment with yourself with a substance that is really not going to kill you. I mean, you're not going to die from taking mushrooms, right? Unless you do something ridiculous. You're not going to die from taking DMT unless it's, unless there's some other chemical that they gave you rather than the actual DMT, right? And so psychedelic research, I think, is the most intelligent way to approach this because it's science-based, it's logic-based. We're trying to really figure out what works and what doesn't work, and we're being honest about it with people because people want to know. And this is important stuff, right? And so when we talk about psychedelics, right, there's always the question of, well, what about recreational psychedelic drug use? And I think it's something worth talking about, right? Because, and I don't have a beef with that. I don't have anything against people recreationally taking psychedelics, right? I don't think it's a problem at all. The problem is some people who don't know what they're doing, and believe me, there is no shortage of people who do not know what they're doing when they treat these things like they're, toys, right? You can take what you think is a small dose of psilocybin mushrooms and come to find that, well, you ate the mushroom, but you have no idea how much psilocybin was in there. And now you're in a festival, and now you're freaking out. You're going crazy. Your friends are looking at you like, what the hell is wrong with this guy? But they're tripping too, so they're also in no condition to help you. They're trying to have fun, they're trying to enjoy themselves, and you're losing your mind, right? This happens all the time, right? And I think even MAPS, the association that we were talking about that is studying psychedelics, has put in music festivals, people who are there in a little corner or a little area in the festival to help people that are just losing their minds off a psychedelic substance, right? Because this is the most difficult set of drugs to use recreationally because they completely just put you in another dimension. And it makes it basically impossible to function in this one. And so recreational psychedelic drug use, it can work and it can be awesome and it can be enjoyed. But it has to be done responsibly and with knowledge, because if it's not, then you have no idea what you're in for, right? I do think that anyone, who would like to use these drugs recreationally should really see before that they use this stuff in a manner that isn't recreational, in a manner that's more serious, so that you can really understand what you're doing. And by the way, this isn't me recommending that you take psychedelics. I mean, I really can't recommend them to anyone because I have no idea what they're going to do to you. I have no idea what's going to happen. These are, to me, the most mysterious substances on the planet. The fact that they exist boggles my mind. I've been obsessed with them ever since I figured out that this was a possible experience that you could have by ingesting a certain substance for a certain period of time. I mean, it's ridiculous to me that this is even possible, right? So you can use recreational psychedelics, right? You can use them recreationally. No problem with that, but I think you should have experience before you try to go down that road. I don't think that you want that to be your introduction to psychedelic drug use, because it could end up going horribly wrong. And so if we're going to do this, I think the way we need to do it is and this isn't, I'm not commanding people to do anything, but it's an opinion, right? We need to keep creating ideas. And I think psychedelics perhaps facilitate that. I mean, I've noticed in my own personal use that they do increase creativity, and I guess you could argue that other substances increase creativity as well, but I don't think that they're as transformative for the individual as psychedelics, right? But besides the whole idea of, hallucinogens and LSD and all this stuff, it's still important regardless, whether you're on, something or you're not, whether you're completely sober, whether you've never touched something. It's important that we keep creating ideas because we need them now, more than ever, really, because the more power we have, which has been given to us by technology, the more of a responsibility we have to protect our existence, because the more that is at play. I mean, I cannot imagine us, wiping ourselves out at the speed that we can now with nuclear weapons, and we have them. And the person responsible of these nuclear weapons, at least in the United States, changes up every 4 to 8 years, right? So that this is a situation that we really have to be careful with. And the reason why we need these new ideas is because we have problems. And what ideas are, a lot of the time, right, are problem solvers. That's what ideas do. They solve problems. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just entertaining. Sometimes they make no sense. Sometimes they're ridiculous. Perhaps half the shit I've said today is ridiculous. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that we need answers to problems, right? Solutions to problems. And the way we do this is by creating ideas. But we need people who are educated about the problems we have. We need people who are educated about global warming, people who are educated about mental health, people who are thinking critically, even if they don't have a degree in something, still think critically, because even someone who is a novice can one day solve a problem that an expert has been working on for a very long time. So I hope that you keep exploring, you keep challenging yourself, and you keep growing. I'm the Modern Ape. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to subscribe.